came and heard me speak at the New England Aquarium, and the next, that evening, I was talking to his class. The next day, he says, Uncle David, 2 things. I go, okay. He says, 1, keep it briefer. I say, okay. The other, talk about the penguins puking. I says, okay. So I did that. It's obviously, I mean, like I say, it's balancing the wonder and the warning, and we have to, and really we have to emphasize. I think the most important thing is that there are solutions. It's not hopeless. I mean, realistically, we're going to lose most of our tropical coral reef ecosystems. The hope is that, part of it's like Steve Palumbi at Hopkins is they're doing studies in Palau, where I was just finally got to, and Samoa, and looking at and finding a lot of corals that have higher tolerance. We knew that some of the corals in the Red Sea had higher tolerance to heat stress, but they're finding that there's lots of corals in different areas that in fact have higher tolerance than corals even on adjacent patch reefs. So it's we're not going to lose them all, but we're going to lose a lot. It's not going to be what it was, but if we can maintain these large areas of biodiversity, if we can expand the MPAs and places like Palau, where you don't have other stressors, like I say, the beautiful shark enhanced waters of Palau, where we gave one of the Benchley Awards. The president couldn't come last May to the Monterey Aquarium, so he sent his son and his ambassador. So I said, Wendy Benchley, don't worry, I'll go give him his award. So went on my dive trip, and then I saw him. I said, Mr. President, I love your country, but I have to tell you, one of your residents attacked me yesterday. He kind of got this look, and I said, really? He says, yeah, I got bit by this Titan triggerfish. He goes, oh yeah, they're bad fish. They're bad fish. So, yeah.
So you said a couple times today that you think that we have all the solutions, just we need the political will to do them. And I guess I kind of question that we do have all the solutions, because isn't it more not the political will but the financial incentive?
Well, I think if you get the political will, you create the financial incentives.
If you have the political will, the money will come?
Well, if you have the political will, you create something like, say, a carbon tax, and that incentivizes innovation and entrepreneurship to come up with the next energy system. I mean, the sort of, what do they call it, market environmentalism. It's like a kind of Republican shorthand for doing nothing. The market's a great system for making sure we have a good enough gas supply for next Christmas, but when you have these existential threats like, Hitler or the nuclear balance of terror, you really need government. You need government to drive the market in the right direction. And then you get, entrepreneurs like Elon Musk to build the world's largest factory to produce batteries that can, store all the energy from wind and solar and other irregular sources that are clean but not constant. But no, I mean, the other thing is, we don't really know all the solutions. We have to grow some solutions, like how do we deal with invasive species? I mean, so California, us being the bellwether and the trendsetter, we've got a requirement that all ships purify their ballast water to a microbial level by 2020. So, the Dutch beat us to the job. Now they have an ultraviolet system that can be installed in ships' hulls, and they're going to make a fortune because we didn't act on it. I mean, the U.S. is just this month going to open its first offshore wind turbine. The wind turbine's off Rhode Island, and Sheldon's very happy about it. Sheldon, White House senator there, is very proud, but it's going to, I think, produce 33 kilowatt, of energy. And last year, the European Union produced 11,000 just on offshore wind, and they're shooting to have 16,000 by the end of next year. So again, they create the incentives through policy. But I mean, there are issues that are still, we don't have the solutions to yet. I mean, we can't spear and feed every lionfish, and that's just one of, maybe the solution to your Burmese pythons is sea level rise. Maybe they won't like the salt water. Or maybe, I don't know, maybe that's the solution to, all of South Florida.
A lot of the discussion in your talk so far has been on national policies and politics.
Yeah.
Could you comment on maybe international UN, or you started talking a bit about the EU, and policies that are being put forth that you may not be aware of?
Yeah, I mean, I've got a sort of national focus because I got a staff of 2, counting myself, so I've told people I won't go global until we get a 3rd hire. But I was at IUCN this couple of months ago in Hawaii, and it was great, not only because I saw a monk seal, but also because they passed a resolution to, 30 by 30 kind of, have 30% of the world ocean in fully protected by 2030, and it seems this is why we shifted our agenda item to drilling by 2030. It's because like at the global level, all the global governments and NGOs have sort of set their markers for 2020, and we want to stay aligned with them in terms of what we do in the U.S. But in the High Seas Initiative, I mean, basically it's very expensive to go out and fish the high seas in terms of fuel costs and the like, and so basically you have a bunch of pirates out there, and the idea of setting aside the high seas as marine protected area bottoms out as economically sensible and allows for much more effective enforcement in terms of going after not just pirates but all sorts of illegal non-state actors. Other initiatives, I mean, it's not global. It's really just the Arctic nations and the Arctic Council and what we're going to do up there. I mean, I tell you, forget the environmentalists. The most relieved people when Shell hit a dry hole and decided to close down its drilling ops in the Arctic was the Coast Guard. I mean, we had Paul Zunfalt saying at our last summit that we don't have any oil spill response capability in Arctic waters. We don't really have any search and rescue capability. When this summer, this cruise ship decided to bring 2,000 people through the Northwest Passage. We don't even have aids to navigation up there. You already have shipping on the northern route north of Russia, and any of those ships that get in trouble, it's like the ships that got trapped in the ice in the 1850s. That's the level of response we have. I mean, other global initiatives are just dealing with the same issues. Unfortunately, even though we're consuming more plastic, most of the plastic pulse into the ocean right now is coming out of Asia, Philippines, Indonesia. And what you're seeing there is, it's like when I was on the AIDS beat, the epidemic sort of just highlighted all the problems in our healthcare system. And right now, the plastic pollution of the ocean out of Asia just highlights all these developing countries that don't have good waste management programs. And so how you develop, if you can develop the waste management, you're addressing both plastic and human health and so many other issues. It's kind of the triple bottom lines. We have to link the economy, the environment, and equity. And if we don't have all 3 elements, we don't have solutions. Anyhow. But somebody else is.
It seems like it always comes back down to too many people, but it's a subject we can't really talk about very much.
Yeah, 7 billion of us. I mean, I remember being at the World's Fair when I was a kid and seeing the big clock, how are we going to feed the world's hungry 3 billion? And now it's 7. I mean, again, we sort of, the most effective, population control is empowering women and giving them access to birth control. That's, again, that's sort of environmental and equity issue. Given good survival rates in education and empowerment, women tend not to have 12 kids. But yeah, I mean, we can't pretend that that population pressure is not a problem, because
Key factor among all global problems.
yeah, I mean, it's a reality, and it's a reality we haven't dealt with effectively. I mean, the last time we had any basically, it's along with climate, it's the other like hockey stick, that's the last time we had any real population control was the Black Plague. Wars don't work, smoking doesn't work.
Did you read Inferno by Dan Brown?
Hmm?
Did you recently read Inferno by Dan Brown?
What's it called?
Inferno?
Oh,
I
no.
won't
Tom
spoil
Hanks
it.
movie.
I just finished reading the book.
Ah.
It talks, in the book, they create a second Black Plague, essentially.
Oh.
Two-
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, environmentalists get a bad enough rap without encouraging plagues. I think.
So what's your perspective,
Change of
pros
the-
and cons, on the role, or potential role of aquaculture in the ocean? I mean, the temperatures are changing, we're seeing
Mhm.
vast shifts in different types of, feed, fish,
Mhm.
upwellings, as things change, there's gonna be more and more shift. So we have this in, fishing industries, small and large, going out, and
Right.
trying to keep track of where the wild fish are. What can we really think as scientists and support in terms of policy? What should we be thinking about regarding aquaculture?
Good. Well, I mean, from a practical point of view, it's kind of like 1870, and you're saying, what do you think of farming versus, market hunting? Half our seafood's already aquaculture. It came in, as most new industries do, as kind of dirty with, high-end dollar species like salmon and shrimp. The reality is aquaculture's growing sector. We're never going to get back to feeding ourselves off of wild fish, but we can encourage and create the incentives for clean aquaculture. There are already a lot of the aquaculturalists. We should be incentivizing, shellfish and, Ernest Smith is the commercial fisherman turned, not Nat, but anyway, I've met it several times. He's commercial fisherman turned sea farmer off Long Island Sound. He's created an integrated shellfish and seaweeds farm, and he's making lots of money, and did sort of open sourced his plan, and there are about 13 other farms based on his model. We just need to encourage through NOAA regs and state regs the best potential means. And a lot of the people in aquaculture are looking at, reduction of fish meal and fish feed and trying to shift away from forage fish. Even salmon folks are claiming to have ways of, feeding them on algae and just finishing them off on, although for salmon I'd rather we eat wild. And, and the other problem with aquaculture is just public education, that people learn what's local and abundant and focus on that instead of ordering shrimp every time they go in a restaurant. But the aquaculture revolution's already happened. We're past it. Now we just have to make sure that that as an industry it cleans up and that we develop offshore. I've seen some of the, in fact I wrote for Popular Mechanics, I forget the name of the big open spar cages. They're doing, had some in Hawaii. Kona Blue is doing some pretty good open water aquaculture with cobia that they're feeding on a lower ratio of protein to meat, and they've actually also working on lowering the amount of forage fish they're using. It's a local market. They don't have to take the fish far. I think there's lots of good potential in aquaculture. It has to be regulated, and we have to move away from, selling predator fish and ranching tuna and doing stuff that's not smart.
I direct the Sustainable Tourism Program at Tell College, and we're looking at how tourism can be a leverage for protecting coastal habitat, marine environments. Tourism's the largest industry in the world now, larger than oil.
Yeah.
10% of the world's GDP, employs 12.5% of the world's workforce, and the third largest exporter behind fossil fuels, chemicals, and ahead of food. So it's a huge opportunity, and we're creating a UN Observatory area here in this location, and looking for best practices that we can highlight that are already here or bring here. So I'm curious if you have some best practices that you think we ought to look at for tourism?
Oh, I don't know, but I'd love to have the conversation. I mean, I'll look at what
Yeah, like
I've heard.
a couple of weeks ago, I was in Iceland and stumbled across something I'd never even heard of, carbon neutral well watching. And this group literally takes old ships that are
Mhm.
going to be, sent off to salvage
Yeah.
and refurbish them, but put in electric motors that they charge with renewable energy before they go out.
Mhm.
So they have no energy, use except for renewable. And because they're using these quiet motors, they don't impact the whales in terms of the sound. So they get much better, and they're also slower. So they, don't, speed up on them and so forth. But then they literally collected driftwood to build the restaurant. So they wouldn't have to, use new logging to build their buildings, and they have solar cars, and they just kind of integrate there. And then, they started out doing it because it was the right thing to do, but what they found is they're saving a lot of money and making more money in the process. So those are the kind of things we're looking for, how we can.
Yeah, there's a company I met that this German foundation's working to promote solar water taxis, and they can go up to 12 knots, and they, of course, the first ones are just going into production in Bora Bora for the high-end resorts, but the hope is they convert them to water taxis for Pacific Islands, and they're also building a second solar-powered windcraft based on the Polynesian voyaging canoes, and they're hoping that can be longer transport for some of the island nations in Oceania. And yeah, I mean, it's again, the sort of ecotourism sort of became a stalking horse for standard tourism, and what you're doing is fascinating. I want to know more because it's a huge industry, and a lot of people want to feel good when they go places, but not, But I mean, yeah, one of the stories I heard is the weird connectiveness of everything. So the rockfish were going away in Monterey Bay, and the fishermen were getting blamed, and then the folks out of Moss Marine Lab who were studying the leatherback turtles realized that turtles eat the jellies there, and the jellies were proliferating and killing a lot of the baby fry, the baby rockfish fry. And the leatherbacks were in decline, and one of the grad students went out to Indonesia and found one of their major breeding beaches where all the eggs were being eaten by the locals. And he's like campaigning now to sort of get the locals invested in the kind of turtle tourism that works in Hawaii and elsewhere, and Costa Rica, and is trying to get, the folks to stop eating the leatherbacks and make it an attractive destination site for watching the world's largest marine reptiles. So there's lots of potential. Of course, Florida and the Keys doesn't inspire it so much. It's like the shifting baselines where you go back down to the Keys now and they raise the Bud Light flag and they throw the snorkelers in the water and they see a couple of brightly colored fish in dead reef and they think they've had a coral reef experience. But yeah, no, I'd love to hear more because tourism, obviously, when I was talking with the president of Palau, interviewing him, he's like, tourism's their economy. And so creating this vast MPA made sense, plus the spillover effects working for their fishermen and the neighbors. But, he says, well, we normally have 100,000 tourists. It went up to 160,000 with the Chinese, but we don't like them because they came in, they built their own cheap hotels, they do package tours, none of the money flows out. We want 5-star diving resorts, so I'm restricting the number of planes that can come in from China. Of course, the first response by the Chinese was they were sending in bigger planes, but it's like the tourism you want, and how do you massify environmentally friendly tourism? Anyway. Anything else? Anyway, hope some of you will come join us in the spring and beat up on our elected officials and also just stay in touch. I mean, go to bluefront.org and put in your name, and we'll keep talking to you about policy and what might and might not work. And I'd love to, and like you've got so many interesting projects here that hopefully we can all stay in touch and do what we can, and when we talk to your kids, we'll tell them it's really terrific.
We're
But they're-
talking about maybe having a session at the Blue Vision Summit next May, and so I wonder, maybe CJ, some of you can think about the kind of sessions that we may want to have that can develop ideas for policy on some of these issues.
Yeah, in particular, like I say, I mean, as I was saying earlier, I think that the idea of coastal resiliency based on ecosystem solutions is something that can become part of the next big investment in infrastructure. I mean, it's not just like Ms. Rice was saying over, and it's not just improving sewage plants and storm drain systems and bridges, but also improving, living shorelines and mangroves and all the, all the living systems that can protect us from the disasters of our own making.
I'm happy to organize, coordinate with the student association so we can identify some maybe priority policy topics. Folks have been
Yeah.
I've been experience there, so maybe we can put together some ideas. And then I'll liaise
With me.
this group and see how their policy topics and where we align, and if we can do something, that would be great. I mean, there's a lot of need in Florida, and now
Right.
it's a national policy. How does Florida fit in those? I think we're kind of was the last dog,
Yeah.
maybe after Mississippi or something. No. In terms of,
Well, you're definitely in a race to the bottom
Race
with
to the
Louisiana
bottom,
and
yeah.
a few other states, but
hey, maybe things are going to change after tonight.
heard. Okay, everybody here's voted.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Thank you.